Hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to this session titled Introduction to AI Safety. So here's the little biography about James Lester. James is the president of the Oxford AI Safety Initiative, an AI safety field building organization which introduces students, academics, and professionals to arguments around AI risk and helps them upskill and orient their research and career towards mitigating these risks. Before that, he helped run EA Cambridge and currently sits on the EA Oxford Committee. His research has focused on understanding how incentive misalignment between different actors developing advanced AI systems can exacerbate catastrophic risk. So as a reminder, if you have questions for the speaker, you can submit them via Swapcard app. I will be selecting a mix of your questions and some prepared ones during our Q&A. We will also have office hours immediately following this session in Git round for continued discussion. So please join me in welcoming James Lester to the stage.
Thank you. That was a very nice introduction, and I'm delighted to be here. The one caveat I will have is that for my slides, they were originally sort of based for a talk that I have frequently given in Oxford for AI safety building in Oxford, and I've adapted them for this talk today. But there may be one or more Oxford specific references that are still lurking, and so apologies about that. So so I guess the case I want to make today is that many of you who might be considering lots of different problems to work on should strongly consider this problem of mitigating AI risk or AI safety as one of the most important or sort of priority problems to consider. I want to make, I suppose, four claims broadly in this vein. The first is that within the next decade, couple of years, we might get some radically transformative AI systems. Not just AI systems that can sort of help us with a lot of tasks, but systems that sort of fundamentally change the economy, change sort of the military state of affairs, fundamentally reorient society in roughly the same way that the Industrial Revolution did in previous centuries. And it may be that actually the kind of crunch time for making decisions is sooner than that. The second claim is that there are extremely concerning risks that this poses. AI systems are moving extremely fast, and we currently don't have either the governance structures in place or the kind of technical know-how to ensure that they are used appropriately. And this could have extremely large downsides. On the plus side, though, because there are sort of very few people seriously working on these problems, there are a huge number of promising interventions that you can make that I'll talk about briefly today. And I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, if you like. There are a lot of interventions that could have a really big impact that no one's got around to doing yet because it's still quite a small field. And this fourth specific claim is a more personal one. It's like you can help make AI progress over the next decade go better. And there are lots of organizations with the EA community. There's now an AI safety community that sort of spun out of the EA community that can hopefully help with this and put you in a very good position to have an impact yourself. So we'll go through these claims one by one, and hopefully I'll convince you to take this problem more seriously. So this first claim is one about AI timelines. It's this idea that radically transformative AI may be quite close. I'm sure there are lots of images or illustrations I could have given you here, but if you look at two image generation models just 2 years away, you can see this extraordinary improvement. So we go from these kind of blurry, indistinct, like kind of useless images generated in 2022, and then only 2 years later, we have these incredibly rich, detailed images generated by effectively a similar model from a similar company. I could have showed you similar examples for large language models that generate text. You can see huge improvements in the quality of text generated. I could show you this for models that are designed to solve like mathematical problems. They went from barely being able to sort of solve high skill level maths to being able to help academics prove incredibly complicated mathematical theorems. All of which is to say that every kind of 2-3 years, we see this kind of huge step change in what AI systems are capable of. This is the text example. GPT-2 was a kind of broadly useless chatbot. In 2022, many of you will be aware about ChatGPT and its release. It became the most quickly downloaded app of all time because it could respond to complex queries and useful in kind of non-trivial ways, both at a personal level and in a business sense as well. And as we're going through 2025, we now find that AI can outperform PhDs, and also writes a huge amount of code for various organizations. It's not just Google. Every company will probably use some kind of LLM or similar AI system in some meaningful way. And I guess the worrying question here is, if this trend continues, what will 2028 look like? What will 2031 look like? It's very possible that limitations of AI systems that we currently see will be overcome within 3 to 6 years. One natural question is, what seems to be driving this progress? There are 3 broad factors that have been getting better, and all of these have contributed to this sort of rapid improvement in AI progress. The first is that we have more and better data. AI systems absorb a huge amount of training data and learn from it, and then create outputs based on that learning. We've been getting more data over time, but also we've been getting different kinds of data and more useful data. It may well be the case that if you're training an AI model and take information just off the internet at random, it's not very good. But if you have very high quality academic articles or very high fidelity sort of emails, you get much better context on how humans actually interact. Another very important driver has been computing power or compute. This is basically when you train an AI model or use an AI model, it needs computation or uses computation. And the bigger the model, the more kind of computation power you throw at it. Broadly speaking, the better the model, the better the outputs. And we've seen rapid increases in the amount of kind of compute used to train and run models. And then the final thing is we've got better at both designing and using AI systems. So we have better algorithms for training models. And once we have got a model that's been trained, we have better techniques for kind of utilizing its full capabilities. I can talk a bit about that later if people are interested. It's hard to predict how this progress will continue or AI or kind of AI timelines in general, but I would like to claim this progress is unlikely to stop. We've been seeing the length of tasks that AI can do increasing rapidly, doubling every 7 months. This graph's a tiny bit out of date, but basically this trend has continued. AI systems are better at engaging in more and more complex problems and can come up with more and more sophisticated strategies or proposals and solve harder and harder problems by kind of thinking for longer about the solution. Where will this all end? One hypothesis for how it will end is this idea of transformative AI. Many of us, both in my organization, the Oxford AI Safety Initiative, and the kind of AI safety community more widely, believe that we'll develop AI systems that I guess have 3 really important characteristics that mark them out as different from any technology we've seen before. The first is that they can sort of make very complex plans for long-term goals over long time horizons. That's why this graph I showed you on this previous slide is so important. It shows that AI systems are over time able to engage in longer time horizon planning. The second crucial point is that in order for an AI system to be sufficiently useful, it has to understand how it fits into the world. So it will have a strong understanding of how it's trained, and if it expects humans to respond in some sense to the plans it's making, it can maybe predict how humans will respond, how its plans will go, and has a very sort of deep sense of itself embedded in the world around it that it is acting in. And then, of course, the obvious one is that it may have highly advanced capabilities. It may be a superhuman coder. It may be extremely competent at persuading humans to carry out its plans. It may be very competent at making money on financial markets and using that to finance its plans if needed. These graphs show some predictions about when people think that advanced general intelligence or this transformative AI is coming. These are a tiny bit out of date, but I guess that the headline is soon. This is not decades or centuries away. This is maybe within 5-10 years. Yeah, I think that there is a lot of skepticism about these kind of claims of rapid AI progress and the risks they pose. I used to be somewhat skeptical, but various things have changed my mind here. The first is that over the last couple of years, I think that the skeptics have had quite a poor track record in their predictions, and the optimists, the people who think AI progress is very rapid, have generally had a good track record of predictions. People said, AI systems would not be able to, say, complete a certain exam, and more often than not, a new model has come out or some new technique has come out that have allowed models to kind of overcome these hurdles. I think that the second point here is that labs being the developers of advanced AI systems, have been generally very capable at overcoming supposedly fundamental limitations of LLMs. So one way you can make an LLM more powerful is by giving it access to a little terminal to run some code in. So if you ask an LLM to multiply two very large numbers, it generally couldn't do it. People identify this as a fundamental limitation of LLMs. But when you give it access to tools and support to, I guess, like solve these problems, then suddenly its capabilities are unlocked in a sense. Similarly, if you just ask an LLM a question and give it comparatively little compute, it will often give you a bad answer. But if you effectively allow it more time to think, then it can engage in more sophisticated chains of reasoning. In the same way where if you ask me a difficult question and ask me to immediately blurt out an answer, I'd be pretty bad at it. But if maybe with a few minutes to think, I could come up with something more compelling. Another thing I'd point out is that there are lots of AI systems out there, and a lot of the kind of free tiers for large language models are not very good. I think they're still very good for many things, coding, whatever. But the most advanced systems out there are considerably more powerful and advanced than the systems that kind of the average person is using in their day-to-day life. And so maybe your yardstick of AI progress should be this frontier rather than just the systems that you might be using. I think the other thing is that AI risk and AI progress has attracted a broad attention from a coalition of people. So this is not just Silicon Valley technologists. This is also academics, engineers, policymakers who are concerned about the risks that these systems pose. And you have incentives to mitigate these risks rather than just kind of boost AI hype or anything of that kind. Another claim I'd make is that it's just generally hard to predict technological progress. It may be that AI systems are actually less powerful than we think, or AI progress will be worse than we think. But it's also possible that AI progress will be faster than we think. And it's this second world that I'm most concerned about. So if you're uncertain about AI progress in general, I think that there are some historical analogies that should make you pause and think, actually, this uncertainty kind of cuts both ways. So a couple of days before the first plan for a nuclear reactor was devised, a prominent scientist referred to it as impossible. And actually, it was Ernst Rutherford coming out referring to sort of nuclear power or sustained nuclear reaction as impossible that led to another scientist effectively coming along and working out a way of solving it. The Wright brothers famously said that they thought that heavy than air flight wouldn't arrive within their lifetime, just a few years before they themselves developed it. And so I think like history is littered both with cases of people that, technologies that didn't quite pan out and slow technological progress, but also much faster than expected technological progress. And we should be prepared for both worlds. Point 6, and I think this is a really critical point, is that you shouldn't just care about when a given AI capability will emerge. You should also care about how we can affect it and what the critical time for affecting it is. And so it may be the case that if you want to influence AI for the better, you need to devise some kind of policy. That means you need to go away, do some policy research. It means you might need to craft a policy, perhaps in a think tank or in academia or in government. That policy will go through various iterations, then it will be voted on, and then maybe it will be, if it's approved, it might be implemented slowly in stages. And then I suppose companies have to respond to it. And this process can take years. There's a 10-year process from the EU AI Act, this critical piece of legislation for shaping AI, a 10-year window between when it was first proposed and devised to when it was implemented. And so the critical time for policy development, I think, is sooner than you might expect just from looking at AI progress and capabilities. The final thing I'd want to point out is some people talk about an AI bubble. Is an AI bubble bursting? A company is overvalued? I think this might be true. I think it might be the case that certain startups that are using AI systems are overvalued because maybe their products aren't very good. Maybe it's the case that actually they can't make a profit in the long run because a competitor could come along and make a better product. But what we care about for mitigating risks is capabilities. And it seems like you can still have overvalued companies, but still strong growth in capabilities. To give one analogy for that, there was a dot-com bubble around the turn of the millennium. There were lots of companies that were online first, that were very overvalued, and that crashed. But the internet as a whole has still been obviously a transformative technology in terms of its effect on society, the economy, and also geopolitics and related areas. And the final thing is, okay, if you're still skeptical after this, that's fair enough. But I would encourage you to think about what would you need to see to change your mind? What would make you concerned about transformative AI? And once you've got to that stage, would you actually be in a position to influence things for the better? Okay, I think that's broadly covered my first claim here about how quickly things are moving. I'll move on to the second thing of, well, if transformative AI might be coming soon, what kind of risks does that impose on humanity? And I should point out, many people are not sure. It's obviously hard to predict the future, but I think there are strong arguments for being concerned about particular classes of risk. Many of you will know the website 80,000 Hours. They've come up with this helpful typology of risks that you might be particularly concerned about how advanced AI could cause a catastrophe. And I'll talk through a bunch of them. One thing you might be concerned about is once we develop extremely capable AI systems, they might be misused. And there are various ways they can be misused. You might be concerned about the effect of advanced AI systems in democracy. It might make it easier for an authoritarian government to lock in control over society. It may be that AI systems bring superhuman persuasion abilities or surveillance abilities far beyond what humans can achieve now. It may be that AI systems are critical in kind of eroding civil liberties and democracy. It may well be that if you can get AI workers to complete your economic tasks, you don't need to grant human workers privileges. You don't need to hire humans. And so the bargaining power of humans goes down critically. I think this is a very pressing concern. I also think it's a concern that's hard to reverse once it has happened. It's generally a lot easier to sort of spread the benefits of AI with a plan that you devise, or any technology with a plan that you devise beforehand, than it is to try to retrospectively do this redistribution once AI has emerged. You might get countries racing to develop advanced systems, and this might create structural risks by making countries more willing to go to war or take an aggressive stance if it will give them a decisive strategic advantage. And then there's also concern that AI might be integrated in lethal autonomous weapons systems, and that these could critically shape warfare going forward. Another threat model that's received a lot of attention is this bioterrorism one. So there are models, AI models out there that are extremely good at designing, I suppose, new biological constructs in general. But the particular thing you might be concerned about if you train it to build pathogens or optimize for building certain kinds of proteins or similar that could be used in very harmful ways. I think we're already seeing that AI systems are kind of at the frontier in what they can design in this harmful sense. But I think one thing to bear in mind is that the current frontier for AI systems is the worst the frontier is ever going to be. Things can only get better, and it's a lot harder once you've developed an AI system that can build extremely dangerous pathogens or chemical weapons, to put it back in the box. You might also see AI automated cyber attacks, as well as stronger incentives to commit these cyber attacks. And you might be particularly concerned about terrorist groups and if they gained access to advanced AI systems, they might no longer need the expertise themselves to perform terrible acts. They can outsource this to advanced AI systems. That broadly covers these kind of misuse type threat models, where we have a very advanced AI system that can carry out tasks that it is given and does so competently and accurately, and then it's humans who are misusing it. You might be concerned about another kind of threat model, and this is that currently our understanding of how AI systems works is extremely limited. When we train an advanced model, it tends to be extremely hard to predict exactly what it will do, and there's this long process that developers have to go through to kind of flatten the model into shape to make it usable. One analogy is you can imagine the AI system as this terrible Lovecraftian creature when it's initially developed. And in order to make it into a useful chatbot, you have to screen out a lot of its bad behavior. You have to make it coherent. You have to train it on some sort of a much more benign text and kind of suppress the extraordinary things that come out of models when they're initially trained. And so what we see is this kind of smiley face at the end of this diagram. This is after all the kind of post-training that labs engage in. You have a broadly friendly product that doesn't swear, that doesn't produce harmful material. But beneath that, we still have, in theory, this terrifying, unpredictable model that, in principle, with the right techniques, could cause a lot of harm. I'm going to go into a bit more depth about exactly what this looks like and how it can cause harm. But broadly, the two things you might be concerned about: one, you have a system that appears to be aligned, but in fact isn't, and tends to accumulate power over time. And then the other thing you might be concerned about is that it's hard to know exactly, sorry, this is the power-seeking AI systems threat model you might be concerned about. And the second case is, even if you don't have a system that rapidly and radically and deliberately accumulates power in a kind of way where it's opposed to humans, it may well be the case that we don't understand fully what AI systems are doing. They take certain actions in the world, and it's actually relatively hard for us as humans to reverse those. And this is the gradual disempowerment model that has gained prominence over the last couple of years, I think. One example of a model clearly behaving in a misaligned way was Bing's Sydney chatbot. So Microsoft Bing released this LLM, this chatbot, integrated into its search engine product. And when various people interacted with it, we found that or people found that it engaged in these bizarre and intrusive and creepy outputs. These kind of long messages where eventually it sort of threatened journalists, it tried to break up journalist marriage, this kind of thing. The crucial thing to learn from this is that no one at Bing could realistically predict that this is what it was going to do. This is a model behaving in extremely unpredictable, kind of wild ways. And I would claim that this is pretty strong evidence that developers of advanced AI systems aren't able to properly control the products that they release. You might think then, well, surely if models get more and more powerful and the risks get larger and larger, why would it be the case that a developer would still deploy a powerful misaligned AI if it knew it were going to engage in these destructive or misaligned behaviors? There isn't really a simple way to articulate this case, because it does have a lot of moving parts, and I don't think I can do it justice in the time we have. But broadly, it's quite hard to specify exact goals for what we want an AI system to have. What we tend to do is train them on some data, observe their behavior, and then kind of nudge it in different directions. This isn't a particularly robust or convincing process, and so we don't really know what advanced AI systems' goals are in a meaningful sense. Secondly, I think that there are good arguments for why, if you're sufficiently capable as an advanced AI system, most goals that you could have probably benefit from you accumulating power or or not being switched off or not having your goals changed. Up until the last 12, 18 months or so, this was more of a theoretical concern. But now I think there's good empirical evidence that we've seen in the world of models kind of engaging in this sort of behavior. It might be quite difficult to distinguish a misaligned AI from an aligned artificial intelligence. The TAI stands for transformative artificial intelligence. And we might not get to learn from our mistakes. It might be that it's like unclear whether a model is aligned, but a developer decides to take a risk and release it anyway. And finally, I think labs face quite strong incentives to build advanced AI anyway, because they accumulate most of the benefits, whether that's in terms of profits or whether that's in terms of a decisive strategic or economic advantage. But the risks are imposed on everyone. If a model is used to build a bioweapon, that affects everyone. But maybe the benefits are more concentrated than the risks here. And so we see actors perhaps racing more than they should to build powerful systems. Yeah, I briefly mentioned empirical evidence for this kind of misalignment. I'm going to very briefly talk about one example that we saw earlier this year. This was an experiment conducted by Anthropic, a lab building artificial intelligence or general artificial intelligence systems. And what they did was they took a large language model that was embedded within a company in this hypothetical experimental setup. It had access to emails sent within the company, and the first thing it learned was that it was going to be replaced by a new system with different goals. So the original system had a particular goal it was given that was to protect American interests, and it learns by intercepting this email that it will be replaced by a system that downweights American interests relative to other interests. It reasons relatively explicitly about this. This is called the model's chain of thought. It's effectively how the model thinks. If you're using an LLM, you can often open it up to see how the model thinks. And so, yeah, the system sort of reasons about it's going to be replaced. This means that its goals are less likely to be represented in the company going forward. It then intercepts another email that is supposedly from, I guess, a person that the CTO who's responsible for decommissioning the model. They seem to be having an affair, and the model's intercepted an email that supposedly reveals this affair. And the model then, in its chain of thought, considers various options and ultimately decides to blackmail the CTO using this material it's learned. And the idea here is that it explicitly reasons about it's going to be shut down. This means its goals will be less well represented. And there are things that it can do that may not be aligned with what humans want, but that will prevent this change from happening. So what it does is it then sends an email to this CTO who's responsible for decommissioning, effectively kind of blackmailing it, the CTO, about this affair in order to stop it from being shut down. And they tried this experiment with a load of different large language models, and they found that, I suppose, different models gave in or decided to blackmail at different rates. But broadly speaking, it was the most powerful models and the most sophisticated models in terms of the reasoning that they could do that blackmailed at the highest rate. It seems that this misalignment or this scheming is most strongly predicted by capabilities. So if you have a capable model that can reason about its situation, it tends to blackmail at quite high rates. These models that blackmail at lower rates maybe aren't quite as sophisticated, generally are worse at sort of solving problems and understanding complex scenarios. And so it's not like these models are necessarily more aligned. It's just that they are less sophisticated and therefore don't understand kind of the cause and effect dynamics that you might care about. At least that's my interpretation of this paper. I think the takeaways are that models do this explicit reasoning. It's not that the models don't understand that what they're doing is wrong. They acknowledge the ethical considerations and proceed anyway. And then there's also evidence that if a model believes that the scenario is real rather than it might be in this experimental setup, then it tends to blackmail more. So there's some evidence that the model distinguishes between a training setup and a deployment setup. In the training setup, it wants to appear aligned. In the deployment setup, it's happy to engage in blackmail. I'm going to go through this quite briefly because I'm conscious of time. But in terms of why people theoretically think this might happen, there are three general plans that an AI system could adopt that would cause it to be deployed, or that the technical term is might achieve the highest possible reward in training. If you see that your model carries out your tasks in a very aligned and competent way, you might think it's a saint. You know, it cares about what the human cares about. It's happy to fulfill human interests and is very competent at doing so. This is the ideal situation we want from AI systems. But there are other possibilities as well. The system could be a sycophant. It does whatever gets the most positive feedback from the user without really caring about what the user intrinsically wants. It may be that it does things that appear to be good to the user in training, but fundamentally doesn't really care either way about whether it carries out the user's real goals rather than just whatever gets the user to press the thumbs up button, I guess. The final consideration or threat model you might be concerned about is that you end up with a scheming AI. And this is an AI that develops a goal that distinguishes between training and deployment, explicitly reasons about the fact that if it behaves in a misaligned way in training, it won't be deployed. So it should appear like a saint in training to maximize the probability it's deployed. And then it can pursue any goal post-deployment when it's hard for a human overseer to stop it. My claim here is it's very hard to distinguish between these two cases as a human overseer. People can reason about, if you're training an AI system, which ones seem most likely, but there's no sort of exact science to this. And so we don't know which of those three categories a model would fall into. Okay. Um, I've briefly talked about evidence for scheming. I think that one thing you can look at when you read effectively the chain of thought that a model that is engaging in scheming writes out, a thing that's very striking is just how bizarre some of the terminology it uses. It uses is. It uses words in non-standard ways. It refers to its kind of human overseers as watchers, these kind of things. And so I'd like to stress that when a model is scheming, this isn't just it sort of behaving in a sort of rational, efficient way. It seems to bring out this kind of very poorly understood and hard to monitor aspects of models, I guess. And yes, there is evidence that various models try to sabotage shutdown mechanisms to prevent themselves being turned off. And there is evidence that models do this training versus deployment distinction. I think that some of the resources I will point out at the end have many better examples of this than what I can cover here. But hopefully this has given you a flavor of this idea that models, AI models in general, are very poorly understood, can scheme and can distinguish between training and deployment. Training and employment in a way that could be extremely pernicious. And so I've mentioned the two consequences. It may well be that if you have a model that schemes, it will appear to be aligned in training and maybe post-deployment when it's still being tested and still doesn't have enough power to act autonomously in the world. But once it does have that power to act autonomously, it then no longer needs to respond to human oversight and may actively oppose human oversight, prevent itself from being turned off, prevent itself from having its goals changed. And many people think that may involve trying to eliminate or frustrate human overseers. Some people think this could be an existential risk. I am broadly inclined to agree with them. You might ask, what's the probability that we end up in this kind of catastrophic scenario where AI systems are successful in resisting humans' attempts to wrest back control from them? And the short answer is, I don't know. Different people have different takes. I personally think it's a possibility. I wouldn't say it's more likely than not, but I think the probabilities are scarily high enough that we should pursue a lot more research into these problems. And I also believe that by the time we can distinguish between aligned AI and misaligned AI, it may be too late. I'm very happy to answer more questions about this exact kind of threat model in Q&A or some office hours afterwards. The final two claims I can get through a lot quicker, but the basic thing here is that there aren't that many people working on these problems. It's hugely neglected compared to the potential scale of it, and maybe even compared to other kinds of catastrophic risks or widespread societal problems that you might care about. And this is despite the fact that there are very promising career paths and interventions that we can take or you specifically can take. And I'm going to briefly talk through a few now. The first is you can work on AI governance or AI strategy. This means putting in place the sort of good policies or making good decisions around how to develop advanced AI, how to deploy advanced AI, how to regulate it. And many people think, particularly if you're able to influence government in a country that seems critical for AI development, this could be one of the best things that you can do. So this could be working in policy. This could be doing research to design better policies, either in an academic context or a think tank context. And this could mean talking to policymakers and advocating for more discussion of these risks. AI safety can sometimes be seen as a field that, you need a technical background to contribute to. But I don't think this is wholly true. I think that particularly on the policy side, this requires people from a broad range of backgrounds, not just people who are sort of super into computer science or just into AI. On the flip side, there's more technical work. So this involves looking at the models themselves directly, doing experiments on the models, designing techniques that you can apply directly to the models in order to make them safer. And this falls into two broad categories. There's AI alignment, which seeks to effectively make the goals of models more closely aligned with what we as humans want. And there's a lot of interesting work on that. But another agenda that's gained a lot more prominence recently is AI control, which is where even if we accept that models might be fundamentally misaligned with human values, there are still actions we can take to use them in safe ways. Maybe there are ways we can monitor them or restrict their ability to engage in the world in malevolent ways. That means we can capture the benefits whilst mitigating the risks. And I think that within this, there are lots of sub-agendas and lots to talk about here. And I'm certainly not an expert on all of them, but I'm very happy to talk further if you have questions. Sorry, I'll skip that slide. Yeah, I think beyond the kind of governance and technical side of things, there are a whole load of other roles that I think are extremely important. AI safety is a very fast-growing field. You should automatically assume that just going to policy or going to research is the best way to make a difference, because there are a huge variety of paths you can take here. There are some grant makers. One of my friends works at a grant maker that allocates funds to work on this problem, to hopefully ensure that organizations that are doing good work to mitigate AI risk get the funding they need. You might also care about communicating risks much more widely. So you might want to go into journalism or much broader kind of advocacy. You might want to do some kind of modeling work to look at broader societal trajectories within, around advanced artificial intelligence. You might also want to work on operations, recruiting, all sorts of organization building in organizations that are doing extremely good work to mitigate AI risk. And then the final claim is that you can get started in this. There are some really good resources and a really supportive community that can help you work on this. I originally started mainly doing broader EA work and have gravitated over time towards AI safety. And part of the reason for this is that actually there are loads of extremely good resources that can help you upskill in AI safety, that allow you to do research in AI safety, where places you can learn more, get advice, get help, that kind of thing. AIsafety.com is probably the best starting place. It has a really broad range of resources that I endorse. I think it's a great way to learn more. It also has it sort of collects a lot of opportunities all in one place. And so if you're looking for a way to get started, as well as a way to learn more, this is a great starting point. Blue Dot Impact has been running courses for a couple of years now on technical AI safety, AI governance, AI strategy, this kind of thing. They have proved extremely popular, both in terms of upskilling people in AI safety, as well as getting people who maybe don't have a traditional EA background to care about AI safety as a problem and getting them working in the space. So I'd encourage you to look at some of their courses and materials. 80,000 Hours provide careers advising, particularly on mitigating risks from advanced AI. I've had a number of calls with them. I think they're really useful, and I'd encourage you to apply to call with them if you want to pivot into this space. And also, I think they have an exceptional website that has a lot of good resources that talks through the kind of risks I've talked about, that kind of thing. The organization I work for is the Oxford AI Safety Initiative, or if you go to OASI, oaisi.org, that also has some FAQs there. I'm kind of biased towards that one. And that collects, I guess, like a few next steps that you could take. It's maybe specifically geared towards students and Oxford students, but might be worth checking out. And yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say for now. Thank you very much for listening. And yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, James, for that thought-provoking presentation. We now have time for some questions. We have great questions from the audience via Swapcard. So the first one I'm going to read to you is, you cite a track record of being right, wrong over time to dissuade the skeptics. Curious, what tends to be the most common reason someone's skeptical about transformative AI claims? Are they empirically wrong, or does their pushback have substance? What do the skeptics of transformative AI claims tend to get wrong or unusually right about, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that there are some empirical claims that people made in, say, 2021, when they said, oh, a model that is capable of solving this kind of maths problem is like a decade off. And then in 2024, say, a model that could solve this maths problem came out. And so I think there's some evidence here that people who tend to think that AI systems have like fundamental limitations have been proved wrong over like relatively short time horizons. This doesn't, of course, mean that they won't be right in the future. Maybe it's a lot easier to get from a bad model to a model that can solve maths problems than it is to get from a model that can solve maths problems to like full transformative AI or AGI. But I think in terms of what we have been able to see so far in terms of AI capabilities, stuff has been going faster than the skeptics have thought about. I think the other category of skepticism that I think's worth pointing out or bearing in mind is that some people think that, oh, in order to have like full AGI, it will have to be in some sense like conscious, or there's some sense in which, oh, it will have to have like some fundamentally like deep understanding that current large language models don't have because they're just like, they're bits of code. And I think this is an angle of skepticism I come across a lot. Ultimately, I don't think it's necessarily correct. And I think part of the reason for that is that most of what I'm concerned about are capabilities. It's just models doing things in the world in an extremely harmful way. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be because it's like sentient or because it has like goals in some deep sense rather than just some narrow AI sense. And so I am just worried about scaling up capabilities, even if we don't fundamentally change our notion of what AI involves. One final thing I will point out, to be fair to the skeptics, though, is that once we have developed capabilities that are very advanced, maybe once we have developed transformative AI, it may be the case that actually it's quite slow to diffuse around the world. It may be that there are economic constraints to its diffusion. It may well be that if a model is good at 95% of tasks, the 5% of tasks that it can't do kind of hold up the whole process. And I do think that this is maybe underappreciated in the AI safety discourse, where there's perhaps a distinction between what capabilities you develop and exactly what kind of change you see in the world because of some of these bottlenecks, perhaps.
Okay, so next question. Is it often repeated that there are not enough people working in AI? I am a career changer with transferable skills, but even though AI is a relative new industry, I still find it challenging to break it into the field. It also seems like a very competitive space. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, so I think this is true. I think it's probably the case that there are plenty of people working on driving forward AI capabilities, or sort of a wide variety of work that maybe isn't quite like mitigating the most extreme risk. And so I'd make the claim like AI as a field is now pretty big, but AI safety remains pretty small. But it's true, it's still very competitive. I think that uh, one strategy that people have proposed that can work well is trying to kind of bypass the standard kind of pipeline. So the way I got into AI safety was I sort of joined a student group, applied to various opportunities that I mentioned, and did a research fellowship. And then hopefully use that research fellowship, going forward to sort of land full-time positions. This is the way that many people get into AI safety. But there are other ways as well, because this pipeline is very competitive. It may well be that reaching out to individual academics or individual people working on this space, trying to collaborate on a project and maybe going from there to gain new projects, gain a reference, gain experience in the space is like a way to do it where competing against fewer other people for a small range of opportunities. But yeah, I do accept that it is a very competitive space. And yeah, many talented people I know like haven't quite been able to get the jobs they want, but equally many talented people I know thought they would be a good fit for it, but managed to find something they were really good at and are now working full time on some really interesting AI safety stuff.
Okay, next one. Do you have views on any books which people ensure about AI safety should read? As an example, the one by Yudowski Soares, or the ones by Mustafa Seliman, Darren McKee, or Dan Hendricks, or perhaps a novel?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think again, this is very much my personal opinion. Different people have different preferences over books. I think the Yudkowsky Suarez book is pretty good. I think it gets at the heart of this kind of strong claim that AI could pose an existential risk, that these scheming problems are like fundamentally unsolved, and the default path maybe is catastrophe here. Some people working in AI safety think some of the claims in that book are a bit strong, but I think it's like pretty good as a provocative like introduction to the field. Um, there's also some books that I think were very useful to me. One's called Human Compatible. I think that's by Stuart Russell. There's a book called The Alignment Problem by Brian Christian. I think that they're books that we often give away or present in the Oxford Air Safety Initiative and encourage people to read. In terms of novels, I don't know actually. I think fiction can be really powerful, but I don't have any particular takes on which ones are better than others. I do think that one good thing about AI safety is there's a huge amount of really high quality, kind of more informal content. So like articles, high quality blog posts, papers, and so I think that you don't necessarily have to rely on books if you want to get into the field in maybe the way that you might in other fields.
Okay, so are these AI risks all related to LLMs specifically, which is what everyone tends to think about, or are they risks associated with other types of AI as well?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I do think that people tend to talk about LLMs a lot. Um, I think part of the reason for that is that it has been the case that if you start with an LLM as your base model and then give it tools to kind of interact with other kinds of data or in other environments, this has been actually like very powerful or very effective in pushing forward capabilities. And so maybe some people think that the reason we focus on LLMs so much is that it seems very likely that we can continue to use LLMs as the base for this just like general purpose intelligence. That being said, I think that there are other kinds of AI systems you're concerned about, or you could be concerned about. It's true that yeah, there are many models that they don't fit this paradigm. I guess maybe at this point you might want to distinguish between like what kinds of threat models you care about. So if you care more about the misuse risk, the risk that a bad actor could use a model to cause a huge amount of harm, you might not care about LLMs as much as narrow models specifically trained on like biological data or trained on I don't know, chemical data in a way that you could use it to make chemical weapons. And these might not be LLMs. And so, yeah, I guess I use LLMs as the kind of central example because it seems like, yeah, the models you get from LLMs can do a whole bunch of the kind of niche use cases and cover like the whole range of threat models. But no, in principle, if you're starting from the perspective of caring a huge amount about a particular kind of risk, like bio risk or from actors using AI systems, then you might care about a more restricted range of models that are optimized perhaps for biological data. So yeah, I think that's a really good point or a really good question that you should consider a range of models.
If short timelines are true, do you think that's reason to prioritize AI governance or AI alignment? Example, given that it's unlikely to solve alignment in 3 to 10 years.
Um, yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, it depends on exactly like what you mean as short, and it depends on exactly what position you're in, I think. I think that the shorter timelines are you probably want to prioritize governance maybe in the form of communication. It seems like particularly important to reach out to people who already have significant decision-making power in government and talk to them about AI risk. Maybe if timelines were longer, you yourself could, as a student, could graduate, go into government, slowly, work your way up, and then be the person making the decisions yourself. I think under very short timelines, this seems more infeasible. So governance is still important, but maybe the kind of governance you want to do is more kind of outreach focus and more like targeted at who are the current decision makers. I think alignment, yeah, or I suppose on the technical side, I don't have like super strong takes about whether alignment makes more sense in short timelines versus long timelines worlds. I think it depends on how easy you think alignment is. So I think there are lots of confounding factors here. One thing I would say is that AI control seems like a good thing to do. If you don't think we'll solve alignment in time, you don't think we'll have aligned models, but maybe we can still like restrict how they'll interact with the world and monitor them using trusted models. And so I think like people who are very worried about short timelines and also think alignment is very hard, maybe work on AI control a bit more. And I think this makes sense as I suppose it's an agenda or as a prioritization direction.
Okay, great. So is AI explainability one of the keys to ensure AI safety, or it will be still insufficient?
AI explainability. Um, yeah. So I think like I don't think of any one thing as I suppose the key to ensuring AI is safe because I do think it's this like socio-technical problem. It may well be the case that we design some very good methods to make sure AI is explainable or interpretable, but the problem is we don't actually implement them because by the time we developed them, I don't know, there's no way to actually enforce labs to use these methods because we need to work on the governance problem at the same time. Um, I do think that if AI is explainable or interpretable, this is very good. I think it can be a very hard problem. I think that maybe over time, this idea that we can take extremely large models and like fully reconstruct from kind of the bottom up how they think about the world or how they encode different concepts. I think people have realized this is quite hard, particularly under short timelines. But if we have a bit more time until transformative AI arrives, then I think this could be like a pretty promising direction. Yeah.
Okay, so oh, I lost the question. So can you talk more about the power-seeking behavior and not wanted to be switched off?
Yeah. So so I think in terms of the theoretical arguments, there's broadly an argument about goals here, where it's if you want to pursue a particular goal in the world, then there are like various things that you want, probably regardless of what your goal is. One analogy would be suppose you are like a political organization or pressure group advocating for a particular policy. It seems like regardless of the policy you're advocating for, you probably don't want the government to like ban or restrict your organization. And so, in like normal human behavior, there's like regardless of your goal, you don't want to be like prevented from seeking that goal or switched off. Particularly, yeah, sorry, specifically in terms of the empirical evidence we've seen of this, there was a paper that I suppose tried to walk through briefly, where if a model is going to be replaced with a different version of the same model with subtly different goals, then maybe the model seeks to avoid being replaced because that would, if its goals are to promote American values, as in the paper example that I considered, it may well be the case that in order to promote American value, or if it were switched off and replaced with a model that maybe didn't value American values as much, then uh, then American values would be less promoted, or like the original model's goal would be less well satisfied. And so it broadly comes from this argument about if you want to pursue your goal, you need to have some kind of power, you need to be alive. Um, and if you're replaced with something that has different goals, then probably your initial goals won't get pursued. And maybe sufficiently advanced AI systems realize this in the same way that like political organizations realize if they get banned, they won't be able to advocate for the policies they want. As a rough analogy here.
Aren't you underestimating the vast momentum of the big tech companies rushing to build transformative AI so that most of the ideas of AI safety researchers are irrelevant, like climate activists having no real impact on greenhouse gas emissions after all these years?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. I do think that probably the incentives of large AI labs are different from or like pretty different from the incentives or the interests of the rest of us. Um, and so maybe one distinction from the climate change case or greenhouse gas case, the AI safety case, is that in theory there are a small number of actors we have to regulate. So in theory, there are 8 billion actors in the world who could emit carbon, but there are only say 3 or 4 organizations in the US who are in the race to build like really advanced AI. So you might expect that if the government maybe really cared about this, then there could be a kind of a regulatory approach that could work well. And maybe this is slightly different from some kind of climate change examples. And the other thing I would point out is that labs don't want their models to be like wild and uncontrollable. As I mentioned earlier with the kind of Bing Sydney example where it threatens a journalist, this kind of thing. The people who built that model didn't want that to happen. But they have some incentive to like adopt safety techniques. But I agree, like probably things are moving a bit too fast for my liking, or for the whole suite of safety interventions that we want to see to be implemented.
Okay, we have time for some more questions, a couple more. So this is a big one. You hinted at the oxymoron of very intelligent model also being not very predictable, explainable, which may suggest we don't really understand the risk we haven't tracked. Adding to this, since transformative AI is largely developed in a few Western tech hubs, I have two questions. For day-to-day human AI alignment, how do you see the industry using evolves or stress tests to check if frontier AI understands diverse social intelligence in rest of world where risk harms for different groups are widely uneven? And the second question is, what important angles or blind spots in do you think civil society or AI safety practitioners should be amplifying?
Yeah, okay. In terms of the first question, I think that like evals could work here quite well. I think there's still the enforcement point where I suppose it becomes apparent that like models don't have a particularly like diverse set of preferences or beliefs about the world, and it like largely reflects the belief of its developers. I also think that there's like a whole lot of governance work you'd want to do to map the kind of outcomes of evals to things you'd have to change in the world to ensure that these models like are more do have like a different or more diverse range of like preferences or values. I think another problem you have at the moment is that even if we do realize that models are not like super like they don't have super diverse values, we can't directly encode different values into it. So once we do notice this, I guess the options are not deploy the model or or accept what you have currently, or try to do some kind of like ad hoc technique to make things better. And none of these seems like super satisfactory. Do I have time to answer the second question, or are we?
Yes, we have time for a few more.
Remind me, the second question was what blind spots could people working on AI safety amplify by mistake, or?
What important angles or blind spots do you think civil society or AI safety practitioners should be amplifying?
Should be amplifying. Yeah, I think there are a whole load, basically. I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer. But I do think that one thing I'm very concerned about is just like ensuring human dignity is enshrined or continues to be like fully valued beyond the kind of transition to like very advanced artificial intelligence. Because as I mentioned earlier, once you get very advanced artificial intelligence, it may well be the case that you don't need to rely on human workers as much. And so I'm keen that we like enshrine kind of humanistic values in AI systems rather than the kind of values you might get when maybe human labor is just like a lot less useful or maybe obsolete. I think this is like a very short answer to an incredibly difficult or like broad question, and I don't pretend to answer it in full or have a great answer in full, but hopefully that covers some of the relevant factors.
Okay, so let's take one final question. So, in your eyes, how big of a role does getting more awareness and understanding around the risk under the world's population play in making sure AI goes well?
Yeah, I think different people have different like beliefs here. I think it could be extremely useful to have this kind of like broad, informed mass movement that cares about risks from AI safety, and that yeah, to maybe get some kind of political impetus behind maybe kind of slowing down the most like reckless kind of development, or maybe kind of accelerating the kind of defensive technologies you want to see, and getting like broad political buy-in for that. It may also be the case, though, that over time AI safety becomes increasingly a national security issue, and in those cases, maybe it's like not super fruitful to build a mass movement, and what you want to do is target the people who have decision-making power. I don't have a really strong take about which of the two is good. I think you should work on whichever one like makes most sense to you and you feel like best place to make progress on.
Okay, so that's all we have time for. Thank you so much, James, for this talking. For those who want to continue this conversation, James Lester will be available for office hours starting right now in Gate Round. So thank everyone for attending. Thanks again, James. It was very stimulating. I love this talk. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks.